There has been so much that I've changed since having my first baby on how I have decided to parent. And I feel like this is a really hot topic because there's a niche of parents out there that are struggling and having a really hard time. And I'm going to dive into some books that have completely changed my perspective and made it so much easier, along with my personal experience. But before we do, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more health and homesteading content. I should start all of this out by saying that I had my first child about 6 years ago. I had a miscarriage in between, and now I am 9 months pregnant, about to have my second baby with a completely new perspective. So, to preface this conversation, I did have a home birth, which you can watch a video on to learn exactly what that experience was like. But leading up to that, I had no one giving me any wisdom aside from like the conventional, wisdom that you hear from your parents and your parents' friends and, everywhere else in our modern world about how to raise a child, from how to breastfeed to how to sleep train and um and all of the typical mainstream ways that you hear of how to raise a child these days. And for the most part, we did really well. I had a landscaping company that I was able to step away from and take a 3-month break from. My husband helped me a lot. He was able to stay home with me. And so there were a lot of things that went great. We did sleep train our child though, and we used the books Baby Wise to figure out how to do exactly that. And I had a completely different perspective going into it when I had my first baby because when I had her, we had the home birth, which was wonderful. And she was in bed with us for about a week. But after a week, I just decided that I couldn't do it, that I needed sleep and I needed self-care. And there was so much that I couldn't do. And it was really hard. So Baby Wise seemed to work really well for us, but it also involved the method of crying it out, which is one of my deepest regrets that I'll never be able to take back. And at the time, when we did cry it out, it worked. We only had to do it once. And after, I don't know, 45 minutes, it worked. My daughter went back to sleep. But during those 45 minutes, I was struggling horribly. I was crying. I was a deep mess because I was ignoring this deep guttural sense of what it really means to be a mother. But I didn't have that awareness then. I just kept going along with what the book said and was focused more on me and my needs, my sleep, and of course, my husband was just supportive of whatever I felt was the right thing to do. And he had known people that had used Baby Wise as well. So it seemed like the right thing to him too. Same thing with school. My daughter went to preschool when she was about 2 years old. And at that time, that was just what everybody did. They just sent their kids off to preschool. And it was always really hard to drop them off because the kids would always cry for the most part. And basically, what we were taught was that everyone just has to desensitize to that. And again, looking back on that, that was a deep regret that I'll never be able to take back. Um, it's not natural to ignore our feelings as humans, but especially for babies and young children. Their most developmental years are up to through 5 years of age. And to learn what it means to desensitize your emotions during that time is not the way that we've evolved. And so it was this book that started to change my way of thinking, the Continuum Concept. And it's written by this anthropologist that went to different parts of the world and studied tribes to understand their behaviors. And it was in this book that she documented the major differences between some of the tribes living in what are known as the blue zones, or basically in alignment with our ancestors, living simply, and recognizing these huge differences in how we give birth and how we parent. Some examples include the fact that bed sharing is the most common way for a baby to sleep in its formative years. And happens all over the world. It provides security, it lessens the risk of SIDS, and it also lessens the risk of other catastrophic events, like if there was a said fire in another part of the house, which has happened. I've heard stories of that, and not getting to your child. Um, there is the balancing of the heartbeat and body temperature that happens through co-sleeping. But there's many, many benefits through co-sleeping on the development of the child. And what happens is when you fulfill your child's needs in terms of attachment, and we're not talking about helicopter parenting here, we're just talking about just straight up bond, a connected bond that doesn't leave a child to cry or learn anxiety and fear in its first 5 years of life. It leads to a stronger, more independent, and grounded older child and young adult. There is also a major sense of community in this book. There were more people around to help take care of the babies. There were a lot of children. Children, 5 or 6 years old, would carry around a baby while tending to a fire. And while this all might sound like way extreme from the modern world that we live in, the fact of the matter is that there was no anxiety or stressed out humans like what we're seeing today. Look at the rates of ADD, ADHD, other learning disabilities, psychological disorders. We are a psychological mess right now. Where we are in 2024, at least within the United States, but in other parts of the world as well, we are a psychological mess. Kids are acting out, they're completely dysregulated, the parents are dysregulated, and there's reasons for that. And a lot of it has to do with how we are raising our children. Of course, there's other factors like food and toxins and what we're being exposed to. But also, it's this broken connection that happens for young babies, young toddlers, all the way up through 5 years old. That brings me to my second book, Healing Our Children. This is going to go into so much of that lifestyle that separates us from our children and causes conflict. There's a really great drawing in here at one point showing the different stages of parents that are disconnected from their young from the very beginning and end up with angry, rebellious teenagers. But guess what? In the work of this anthropologist, rebellion, not normal, not seen. That is a reaction to the brokenness that comes from childhood. And all of this to say, I was born in a hospital. I went to preschool. I did all the normal things. And I have a relationship with my parents. Who's to say whether or not that relationship could be actually stronger or different if it was another way? I have met other people and talked with other people about their experiences, it's very rare to find someone that has lived a more traditional parenting lifestyle with their children in terms of home birth and homeschooling and attachment parenting, if you will. I don't really like that term because I feel like it has led to a generation of parents that are just not giving boundaries or limits and letting their kids run wild, which going the other extreme is also not good. But what you'll learn in books like these is that it's not about just like letting everything go. limits and boundaries and behaviors are still all very important, but there's just a place of connection. So, for example, if a child did something wrong in this book and started acting out, the tribe would ignore the child. As long as the child was not getting hurt or not affecting anybody else, that behavior is ignored. No one pays any attention to that behavior. They don't get disrupted by the behavior. They don't feel dysregulated by the behavior. But in our modern society, we are so stressed, we are so dysregulated that if we hear a baby cry or a child act out, then we freak out. And it's just a big, massive freak out. But in the book, Healing Our Children, it's going to go in to every aspect, very detailed as to how we can live a more connected life with our children and heal ourselves and also heal them. And this book, of course, does have um, some information on preconception and pregnancy and birth, but it also goes into the actual causes of modern day diseases like birth defects, SIDS, autism, infertility, colic, tooth decay, miscarriage, infant mortality, morning sickness, premature birth, scoliosis, postpartum depression, and more. So I think this is one of those books that if you want to have children, you need to read this. Ramiel Nagel is very much in alignment with Weston A. Price. The foreword is by Sally Fallon. And I just think this is one of the most important books you can read as a parent. Then, of course, there is the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and child care. And it's going to cover everything that we've talked about. But what's really nice about this book is that it has specific remedies for things like measles or allergies and eczema or neurological disorders or itching and bug bites and stings, strep throat, thrush. There's whooping cough and recipes for foods in here. So baby's first foods. So I think this is a great book to have on hand to read as soon as you get it and gather up all of your homeopathic and holistic medicines and food supplies in order to grow. This book I'm currently reading and I really love it. So I can't give you perhaps the full rundown, but this is a great book to explain how to have a happy home with your children, specifically for a happy homeschool. And one thing that I read in here that I loved so much is its focus on being a balanced mother, how to be a balanced mother in the most natural way that we have evolved over time to be. And I think a great example of this is going back to the whole rebellious teenager topic. I've had a lot of parents say to me with the second one on the way, oh my gosh, just wait until they're teenagers or just wait until your kids are fighting. And that is a cultural modernization of how families are. I'm so blessed to have found a community of people that are in alignment with these sorts of values, such that their children are not rebelling and fighting at ages 11 and 14. Sure, there's going to be disagreements between everyone in the family, but there's no yelling in our house. My husband and I don't yell at each other. I can't think of the last time that we ever yelled at each other. That's just when a disagreement goes in a direction that it shouldn't. It seems like it goes in a direction of complete dysregulation. It doesn't need to go there. And if it does go there for you, between you and your partner, your spouse, or your children, then some work needs to happen. Some work for healing, because that is not a healthy environment and it should not be accepted. But this little chapter on siblings was really beautiful because it basically made sense of the foundation being love, of how important it is to model love. And there will be disagreements, there will be arguments, but it should never escalate, ever. And just going back to the very beginning with the continuum concept, rebellion is not normal. That comes from a place of dysregulation. We need to reset our lives within our homes so that way our relationships are more even balanced. And the books that I've shared with you today give you excellent tools on how to do just that. So with my daughter, we went from sleep training to co-sleeping after I read the Continuum Concept. And I was about halfway through this book when my daughter started having a hard time being by herself in her crib in her room. And I had already read and started discussing with my husband that I think we need to revert backwards. And there's even stories by that author talking about how reverting can actually heal that phase of their lives. And it might not even take that long for them to wake up one day and say, okay, I want my own bed, which now my daughter does. She wants her own bed. She doesn't want to sleep with us. But that is all from her own independence when she was ready, when she tackled those fears. And so we made the switch when I was halfway through that book, discussed it with my husband. And then my daughter said to us one night, I think she was like 3 years old, she said, Mom, I'm scared. I don't want to be alone. I want to sleep with you. And we said, okay. And we started doing it. And at first, of course, there was a little transition of like her just being in party mode. The way we set a rhythm was that we read in bed. And so sometimes we would read out loud whatever we're reading to her, but it would be our books that we're reading for our own interest. Sometimes we would give her just a little journal and a pencil or a pen for her to draw and create whatever she wanted while we were in bed reading. And then when we turned off the lights, it was time for bed. And that was it. And everyone went to sleep. Some other different things that I do now that I didn't do back then was I always tried to buy myself some time. So if my daughter asks me a question like, can I do this? Or I want this? Or can I have this? Oftentimes I say to myself, I don't know, let me think about it. Because think of what a great tool that is for her to learn so she doesn't have to answer so abruptly or cave in to people's requests. She can always take whatever time she needs to just think about it. And that way I can process whatever I need to process in order to make a decision that I feel comfortable with and is good for her. If there's ever anything that she wants to do, I'm always looking at opportunities for things that she can do to earn that. So if she wants to get painting set up and, paint some paper, I will say, all right, well, you need to clean up your room. You need to clean up these things on the coffee table, or after you bring your dishes to the sink, then we can do it. So there's always an exchange, at least a moment for me to look around and think about what she can be doing to earn that next activity. Something else that I've learned from some of the culturally different mamas in Mexico raising their little ones is that if they don't pick something up, it gets thrown away. It's as simple as that. If they don't pick up something that they've taken out and played with, it gets thrown away. Because it's too much for us moms to try to clean up after our children. They need to learn how to do that. And of course, within the first 2 or 3 years, they're going to need help in learning how to do that. There are many times that I would sit with my daughter and help her and say, okay, your room is a mess. Let's start with this pile. Where does this item go? It goes with the dollhouse. Everything has a place. So let's find its place. And so I did that with her, maybe for even just like a few months before she was able to understand that everything had its place. Now, occasionally, we've gone through a period of where I say, okay, clean up your stuff. And I want to give her the independence and grace of when she says she's done, I say, okay, and I don't even need to check it. Giving her that sense of trust is important. But then there's times where if I go back there and I see that she shoved things into corner, I'll say, oh, look, this is not the place. And I take it right back out and I put it in the middle of the room and emphasize the importance of putting things in their place. This is teaching the child responsibility for how to take care of their things.